Hello guys, hope you can hear me well. Again, I hope we won't have problem with Hangout and YouTube integration and everything. Never mind. Anyway, I hope we can discuss too, because here I'm alone again on my screen. I can't see the invites. Salut Sylvain. Salut David. Hey Andrew. Yeah, I'm trying to make maybe this. Can you try to speak, Sylvain or David?
Well, do you hear me?
Moi, je t'entends pas, non.
No?
Si, mais j'entends.
Andrew?
Tu m'entends?
Anyone who has a mic?
Yeah, hey there. I hear you.
I don't know how to make you, how I can hear you. It's so shitty. It will be a monologue again.
Yeah.
I think people can do it usually. Yeah, it's only me who can't hear because I'm the creator of the Hangout. I think I'd like to hear you too. Let's try something else. It's so shitty.
I hear you.
I don't know how to make you. Oh, I can hear you. It's so shitty. Could be a monologue. I think people can do it usually.
Salut tout le monde. Hello everybody.
Yeah, it's only me who can't hear because I'm the creator of the. I'd like to hear you too. So shit. People can do it usually. So, I'm here again. Anyway, we will start. I will share my screen. And I will see what happened. But I still don't get why I can't hear you. It's so shitty. So if you have questions, don't hesitate to ask with the chat, and we will do like that. So, share my screen, the whole desktop. Here we are. So, what we will see today is TestWork extensions and TestWork in general. So the actual framework that is used inside Behat and that I use to implement FunkSpec, another test framework oriented for functional testing or system testing. So the one that is just after unit tests. So it doesn't replace Behat because Behat is used for communication mainly, using Gherkin syntax, scenarios, and things. And this one is just a test runner that can run tests, verify expectations of whatever you want. It's not at all used for communication, but FunkSpec is a bit different and complementary to Behat. So everything on Behat and FunkSpec is based on extensions. A bit like everything is a bundle in Symfony, everything is a TestWork extension. And you will see that it's exactly the same thing finally. And I think they got it right, because in Symfony, a bundle is something like the minimal brick you can have in. You think it's a minimal brick you can have in a Symfony kernel, but it's not true. Finally, what you have at minimal is an extension. Everything is based on dependency injection extensions, and a bundle is just a conventional way to register an extension. And you will see that it's the same thing for TestWork. So it's, for us Symfony developers, the usual shit. We always register extension. We are used to it. We are used to services and make unit definitions and tag them and everything. So we will see. I try to keep focus. I have some use cases for extensions. I actually had to implement 3 extensions for my day-to-day work. I will show you them. So it's event store initializer. So this is a application-specific extension to initialize my my tests with some common common objects. Here it's about having instance, and based on the different adapters I have, I want a different instance of each adapter for each test. So it permits me to test my test suite on each and every adapter I have, instead of having to write one test for each adapter. I just write one test and give him different adapters. So that's very cool, and that's thanks to TestWork, which implements very nicely the suite concept. Then I had to, because I am using PHP spec expectations, so it's this tool here, it's Bossa Computing, Bossa Consulting, based on PHP spec matchers, and it's a simple function where you call expect a subject, and you can then call matchers. So for example, expect everything to be true or to match some regex or whatever, and this will throw exceptions. The problem is TestWork will catch these exceptions and try to present it nicely instead of just flooding your screen. It will try to present them nicely. As an example, if I run my test suite, you will see that every time there is an exception, it means a failure, so it will show in red. But moreover, it will also display the message of the exception. That's by default. Then you can have a more verbose version where you can see the call stack, which is colored, and where it has been called in your code, and some other interesting features like diff, depending on some exceptions. So if some exceptions are about comparing objects or arrays or strings, it will display the diff, green and red differences, directly in your client. And this is wonderful because you can compare objects properties and the state of an internal object and see what is wrong. And this is beautiful, and it's only PHP spec that does that. And to profit from this feature inside FunkSpec itself, I had to make an extension. We will see later how I did that. And the last one I had to create is some glue between FunkSpec and Mink. So we all know that there is a Mink extension for Behat, and this Mink extension allows to configure Mink and its drivers internally via a simple YAML file. For example, if work file, for example, here we activate the Mink, and we can give him the list of sessions. It works with Behat, but it also works with FunkSpec because it's same internal framework inside. So that's already cool. We can use it, but it misses something. So the Mink extension is totally based for Behat. It permits to inject Mink objects inside a context class, but that's all what it does. It also has a listener to reset the session of Mink, but again, it's only listening on Behat step events and scenario events. But I wanted something else which listens on FunkSpec events, and that permits to initialize a spec object and not a context object. So I had to make my own extension. You will see it's only glue between Mink and FunkSpec based on an extension. So that's the subject of the day. So what is an extension? An extension, you will see, is a simple class that is Symfony component DI based, and we will look at it. So the store initializer. Store initializer. So I didn't see if you had a question yet. Oh yeah, I'm using i3 indeed. So we will see the example of the initializer extension. So what is an extension? It's a simple class that implements TestWork service container extension. This service container extension is, and it uses, I thought it was using directly the Symfony component extension, but no, it's its own interface, which is Symfony based. So everything that you manipulate inside an extension is usual shit of Symfony container configuration definition and definition and references. So there is no YAML loader or XML loader. It's everything is done in PHP directly, but you will see that it's not that horrible, and that you can do easily some things. There is also a new concept that is not present in other usual Symfony extensions. It's extension manager. I don't know yet what it does, but I think it permits to verify if an extension exists or to activate it. So if you have dependencies on different extensions, like I do with Mink, I think I can activate directly an extension if it's not yet loaded. So that's great because I didn't tested it yet. Maybe today we can test it. So that's what an extension is. So inside your whatever you want to do, you give him a name, and what you do usually, if you have configuration, you can do that initial process is called after. It's like for handling compiler passes, and what you do usually is load. So you just define a new definition. So the simple thing I had to do in order to have a new instance for each of my tests is define, so tag a definition. So I created a class that we will see later, define it as a service, and tag it as an initializer. So it has the initializer tag, which means FunkSpec will use it to resolve arguments of my spec class and to inject automatically the good object. And that's about it. I set as a definition, I give him a name, and that's it. Then the object itself that is useful, and you can see that my extension is about 2 classes. It's not a bundle with every bullshit you can see inside. It's just 2 classes. So that register a service, and this is a class associated to the service. So it's a spec initializer. So this is totally specific to my use case. It's not related to the extension itself, but it's a good example. So my spec initializer is totally related to FunkSpec. It's not TestWork anymore, but it's a quick example that what you can do. We had the same thing. It's called and I have a spec initializer. I wonder if it's doable to simply merge these 2 concepts and make a more generic concept and that everyone could use inside TestWork. Yet, for the moment, we didn't find a compromise. So we just duplicate the work. So what this sheet does is every time a new spec is tested, it will try to instantiate it, and it will detect the arguments of the constructor and see if this argument needs to be a store object. And if it is the correct store based on the name of the suite we are running. So if I am currently testing the in-memory store, it will instantiate a new store in-memory adapter, otherwise PDO, otherwise Mongo. And so I have 3 adapters currently, and each of them will be tested with a different adapter, and is how I define my suites. So this is BHAT as the same concept, test FunkSpec also, so it's the same thing. So here you have the suites, and you can give him names. So it's simple array, arbitrary size, arbitrary argument. And you have here memory, PDO, and Mongo. This means if now you run your TestWork suite, it will in fact run the whole suite. So it will run 3 times your tests, but each time with a different, potentially different arguments or parameters. So here, based on the name of the suite, I decide to use one or another adapter. So it's really wonderful for GoFret, for example. GoFret has tens of adapters, and would you prefer to make one test that says, okay, the adapter should be able to find a file? You do one test class for each adapter. So this is definitely an advantage to make functional tests. You make one test and many suites. And each of these suites has arguments. So here it's just one setting, it's DB name, and I use it inside here, for example. I get the setting of the suite to initialize my database from Mongo. And same for PDO. So that's a good example. It's 2 classes, very simple. There is a lot of boilerplate, so it's just create a class, make a definition, and basta, and register it here. So it's really. So that's it. Any question yet? No. I hope you got it. So second question. No, second point. I try to keep focused. Oh yeah, the current ecosystem of who writes specs, tests, and how they do it. Well, it's a good example, I think. What's currently going on with again with Constantine and Marcelo Duarte, the ones behind the PHP spec and BHAT, is they are doing the things well, and they are doing atomic and small extensions, and it's becoming viral. Everyone makes his own small extension, and it's very practical because it's easily maintainable. It's not a mess, and it's a micro library principle. Like make a small tool, and thanks to the extensibility of the framework, you can inject you can go wherever you want. You don't have to build an unmaintainable machine. So there is already a few extensions, more than a few. I think PHP spec has more extension. So one, for example, is to have code coverage. One is to to make no, that's different. Laravel, there is a extension for Magento, and I think they are quite small and everything. So PHP spec is not really, it's not at all based on TestWork, but it's the same principle, and a lot of concepts of PHP spec are in TestWork finally. I think in 1 year or two, PHP spec would be rewritten in TestWork, because it's exactly the same things behind, and which means that you could use Magento extension inside FunkSpec or Behat everywhere you want, and you would beneficiate from every feature of them. And this is a great step forward for cross-pollination. I don't know. Okay. But there is a lot of different extensions. Same for TestWork. Well, it's not well known as TestWork yet because everyone does Behat. But I think most of them could be used as in FunkSpec 2 and should be generalized. So you know there is Mink. Mink extension is the most well-known Symfony 2 extension. And the common context. So here we see that contexts are totally specific to Behat, and which means that friendly context, for example, even though they are really useful to make some common stuff you do in web testing, well, you can't use them with FunkSpec. But I think maybe a small glue between both could bring them, or maybe you can directly instantiate a context class. I don't know. Anyway, so the tendency is to make small extensions and very focused on something, like we can see in. Like we can see inside our example here. So how to write an extension, we already saw it. It's really that simple. But I have an example of a more complete extension, maybe, where I wrote tests. So it's in FunkSpec. So I don't know yet how to handle it correctly, but in 3, yeah. In FunkSpec, I tried to make a extension folder inside the FunkSpec source directly, and that's where I put my my extensions. And then I would like to split them using a git subtree split and put them in different directories, a bit like Symfony maybe does. I don't know yet, because I need different requirements inside my composer edition. Here, for example, the Mink extension needs Mink, but FunkSpec itself doesn't, so I made a subfolder just for that. So it's really that simple. You don't need anything else than an extension class and something that does the work, and that's about it. Then my tests, I made functional tests for this extension using FunkSpec itself. It's quite funny to see. So if I run the specs, so I need PhantomJS running, for example. So my spec says that I should be able to see a different Selenium instance for each suite. So it's currently not true. And I have a spec that launches a spec to verify that it fails or it doesn't. For example, I have a func folder where I have a fixture spec. So this one is just used internally to verify that the spec indeed works. It's not a real test. It's just a one that uses the extension. And that's about it. And then I have a feature spec. Execute the spec we just saw and verify that indeed it uses one of the different Selenium drivers or capabilities. So it's that simple. I just made this simple test to verify that indeed the glue is correct, that you can indeed see different browser capabilities. So currently it doesn't work because I don't have a working Selenium grid. I should have one instance of Internet Explorer 9, 10, 11, Firefox. But I like the principle to test in each and every browser. I didn't find the use case yet, and maybe as we told, it's maybe useless because it's a work of front-end tools to make this kind of work. But we still do that with Selenium as PHP developers, so I think it can be useful. So now we have so this extension here. I will go back to the FuncSpec extension. So you can see my extension suite for every suite. It will inject the correct link session. It will reset the session and put the correct driver inside. So I have one test, but it's run 5 times. It's funny to see. So if I want, you can see it 5 times. Well, it's a bit verbose. It's not really practical to see. But on the other example here, that I will run once. The one is you will see that I have 2 tests in my spec. One that says it allows to store same version, and one that says it's not allowed to store superseded versions. And it's run 3 times. One with in-memory driver, one with PDO, and one with Mongo. And how I did that is so here, for example, in my constructor, I said I need to test my feature, and the simple fact that I defined this as a store instance, I type hinted it, so this will inject the correct store each time for each suite. So it's as simple as that. I already thought we could go one step further and use dependency injection definitions for each of your tests. It could be a new way to define your tests. I think it would be a bit hard to every time you want to write a test, you have to make a service definition. Don't know if it's really good, but there could be an extension for that. It's really simple with TestWork to see that you just need to define a class, implement an interface, tag it, and this class would search your test instances thanks to dependency injection container. It's really as simple as that. And you could have more complex tests or more easy to maintain tests and more decoupled, which mean more maintainable tests. So I think we already saw everything I wanted to show finally. Any question yet? I wonder why everyone is muted. Pierre, any question? Quel est le muscle? Let's think. Do you see my screen, by the way? Okay. Yeah, so I think this could benefit from in functional testing for GoFret, because I don't know how GoFret currently handles its adapter tests. I think there is one for each. Oh, there is a test suite. Okay. There is one adapter for each. There is a spec. Because there is no functional test, right? Sorry. So, are there functional tests for GoFret yet? So apparently yes. Okay. So there is functional adapter. Indeed. That's exactly this. Extends functional test case. Okay, and there is a functional test case. This one. Okay. So it uses typical OP inheritance. That's good too. That's a good way to do it. Use language instead of some other things. That's good. So I think it's clear like that too. To use typical inheritance to spec or to functional test all the things. What do you think? Have you seen the example of initializer? So having a class that is responsible to create the correct adapter for each suit. Would you prefer that, or would you prefer one class that extends functional test case for each adapter? Yeah, I'm not sure neither, because I really think that letting the language do its thing is really good. Yeah, Pierre, don't you have a preference? You are the guy behind Gofret. Well, Antoine was, but now it's you, aren't you? Yeah, I personally like the simplicity of my example here with the event store. The simple fact of having to put this here and it will inject it for each suit is good. The Gofret example with which its class that extends is more tied to the language. It's less tied to the framework, which is good. So here it's PHP unit. So that's another problem. A problem. It can be PHP unit is maybe not meant to make functional tests. Well, it works, but it's a bit strange to use PHP unit framework to make functional tests. Well, it has everything it needs to work. It has a expectation framework. It has a setup, tear down. That's something FuncSpec doesn't have. Tear down. It uses a constructor as a setup, but it doesn't call tear down. There is no. But I didn't have any need of tear down yet. But yeah, I think Stuff created this functional test suite, or this abstract test suite here, functional test case, or maybe not. And we can totally reuse it. There's no problem. Oh yeah, but I see. There is another advantage, maybe, compared to PHP unit. I didn't show you. I told you about running when you run only one. So I stopped my services, so I will start them. So yeah, imagine you don't have PostgreSQL installed and it needed. You can run your suite using -s, and it will only run it for one suite instead of 3, as you can see in memory. Have more than one? Apparently not. S. No. One suite or all suites? That's interesting. But it can be good to detect feature, or if Travis doesn't have I don't know, whatever adapter, you can disable it using S something. But it would be good to have a list here, -s. Could it be possible? Suit. No, it's not. That's something we should improve, I think. It's sad that Questia is not here. He could have answered us so easily. So we are about live coding, right? So let's try a new thing, which is the one I talked about inside the other inside Mink, the Mink extension I wrote. So that for my own Mink extension to work, I need the Mink extension from Behat to be registered too, because this one is responsible for creating the Mink and the sessions, and this one is only responsible for injecting the Mink object inside my spec. And I did not make any expectation, but in the composer.json I said I need Mink extension, but I didn't say anything else. So that this could be a problem. And so I think inside the extension itself we could try to use the initializer method to say that the manager something. Oops. So what do I need? Activate extension locator. initialize extension. I'm not sure. Let's see if bhat itself, something like that. How could I do that? So they are empty. Gonna need it apparently, but of a locator. What is a locator? Then I initialize, instantiate, validate, located, instantiate. Okay, so it's apparently I just have to give him the name. Do I already have Mig extension? Yes. I could do something better. .5 already. I'm not sure. Anyway, we will try that. And we will see if it still works. So let's try this. It's impossible for it to work. I will simply comment it. Maybe it's out. So how this shit? How to make dependencies? Could it be? And I could try that. Activate the extension, but we can detect. Well, it doesn't seem to be executed. It's not executed. It's strange. This shit executed, initialize. I don't know who calls it. It's activate extension that call it. What? Strange. It should be called. It should be called. Strange. Oh, shit. I know why. I commented the extension key. Okay. Oh, we see all the extensions that are registered. So we can see here that everything is an extension in TestWork, and that most of the things I use for FunkSpec are directly TestWork extensions. So the CLI is about handling the commands and everything. Code extension, it's everything that makes the actual wrap it inside the result, like failed or success. Suite extension is the one that handles the suits. And it's really funny that the only one I made myself should be somewhere here. Yeah, I made one extension for FunkSpec. Everything it's contained, everything that FunkSpec does is activated with this extension. All the others are TestWork generic. It's funny. And so I can see that Funk Ming is here, but I should have Ming. So the only thing that I should do here so it's by name, I think. The coding through maybe simple as that. Yep. If I works. Okay. Currently, you can't load an extension. I will still try. Well, apparently, shit. It worked. So you can activate the extension, but it's useless because it's not configured correctly. Maybe we should trigger something. It's not displayed, apparently. No, it's not. Does anyone know how to make trigger or work correctly? Shouldn't this be displayed, or at least the error handler should transform it inside an exception, right? Into an exception. Trigger error. What the heck? Or maybe my my error reporting level is not high enough. Doesn't give a shit. And this one neither. Oh, that's because what the heck? Because I activated it again. What the damn? Oh yeah. Oh. Define offset 0. Invalid error type. So what is this invalid error type specified? What are user notice? PHP notice Ming extension should be activated. Notice Ming extension 9254. This is a Ming extension problem now. Interesting. Session U9. Yes, it is. Oh yes, this is yeah, link session. Okay. So I don't know the best option for that. Do you have any idea? Should I throw an exception? Should I trigger an error? Should I try to activate it? We have all. It's practical. Yeah, I'm. It should be. Why is there not get extension but activate extension? Yeah, mean here if not get extension Ming, then activate it. This here. Well, the first is to test if the extension is not yet is not loaded. If it's not exported here, it means it will go inside this if, and we will try to activate it. I don't think it's a good idea. We should just trigger or this row. Maybe. If we want to use them, yeah. Yeah, I think it's the only way. This simple. And that's it. I think there is no other way. But it's practical because in Symfony you have to use a compiler pass for that, I think. There is no way to get inside the initialization process, but compiler passes. It's a bit more complicated with Symfony, because Symfony you will have a kernel parameter or container parameter which is named kernel.bundles, which is an array of class names that are registered. And based on that, you can say, hey, you have to use this bundle or this bundle. So that's actually more practical. This initialize method after loading everything could be practical. Well, compiler passes are a bit more complicated, I think. Do you know any other way to get the list of bundles and to make dependencies between them or between extensions? I don't know any. Oh yeah, right. I think too that there should be a ether, like something that say if extension is activated or not. But I think Constantin went a bit too far here, and he made this initialize method without needing it, because no extension he wrote uses this initialize method, as we can see here. He simply doesn't use it. They are all empty, and I think he didn't have the need for it, and that's why the extension manager doesn't have is extension or has extension, I think. But the get extension, I think, is good enough. You can maybe cast it as a boolean, because it returns null if it's not set. So I think that's okay. Not get extension would be the equivalent, I think. Any other question? Would you use FuncSpec for functional tests? Or do you? How much do you do functional tests, by the way? Mm-hmm. When we do functional tests, it's usually with Behat, I think. Yeah, me neither. But with Behat, but it's not its direct role. So I'm kind of confused between using Behat without a client, like PHP spec and other frameworks. Spec their feature using Behat, but that's to describe how it works and everything. Maybe practical. But I think it's a lot of extra work to make actual working Behat test suite, because making scenarios, features, and find the correct vocabulary and everything. It's important indeed. And then map the steps to their definition using regex, and then implement the actual stuff. It's kind of hard work, and sometimes we test or we don't test things because it's so much specific that you don't make a scenario for it. It would pollute your feature suite. Like, do you test if a link button works, or a delete link or a delete button works with Behat? Well, you could, but usually the feature is more abstract. It's more I can manage the list of things. So you could have a scenario that says, okay, I can delete this thing, and maybe that's the way to go. Not sure, but I think that anytime you have like really technical detail or technical thing that worth be tested, but that does not worth a scenario, then you could use a functional test using either PHP unit or FuncSpec, but I don't know any other. Or maybe Codeception. I don't think I like it. So yeah, I don't know a lot of Behat scenario because the client is not involved. Yeah, I think Behat should describe the behavior and the features clearly and be used every time the client wants to communicate about them. But as soon as you don't have a client and the client didn't speak about this technical detail that, for example, you have a complicated form, and if you go from one tab to another, it should validate first or something. Would you describe that in a feature? I think you would have thousands of features, and in that case, maybe FuncSpec would do the trick because you would have only a simple question, a simple class. I think Behat is better as documenting the application than FuncSpec would be, because FuncSpec is not really readable, it's not user-friendly, it's really developer-friendly, and to test some edge cases that you didn't test in Behat. Maybe I would see it like that. For the user acceptance thing, but also if you have you can have functional test or system test or integration test, or there is a lot of names that sit between unit tests and user acceptance test. So it's when you want to test integration between two components. How would you test, for example, how would you test that the Symfony form component correctly works with the validator component? You have unit tests, so you have the unit test for the form, you have the unit test for the validator, but you don't know if it really works. Would you use Behat for that? No, I don't think so. You would use Behat for well, you could, but that's there is a thin layer between those. I'm not sure when to use what. But I think for a technical thing like, is the form component correctly integrated with the validator component, I would use FuncSpec or a functional test at least. And I will. There is a difference between PHP spec or PHP unit, which mocks everything, and FuncSpec, which mocks finally nothing or what you wish. But with FuncSpec, you would instantiate the thing and you would insert into the database if needed, and that's the main difference. So yeah, I'm still a bit unsure. But I don't do Behat anymore a lot. Because because we don't have the luck to have the client write and communicate with us a lot. Well, the last client we have is so busy, he doesn't have time to answer. Yeah, I think it was a discussion at large scale because I think it's a problem for a lot of people, and a lot of people misuse Behat and use it only as functional test framework, and when it could be used as a communication tool. And as soon as you have this communication, it's great. But unless if you don't have, then maybe it's not. Maybe it's a little bit too much. It's a lot of headaches. Like for KNP-RAD bundle, you remember the Behat features description inside. For KNP-RAD, you have to describe the classes and configuration files and all this context. But it makes sense. It's I think the Behat suite of KNP-RAD bundle is correctly written. I think it's totally describing the context as a user of KNP-RAD bundle, which is a developer. Developer writes classes and writes routing YAML files. So I think it's great, but it's complicated. It's a fucking headache. Yeah, I think you need to know the difference between Behat, or the role of Behat and the role of functional test, and don't mix the concepts, because I think a lot of people misuse Behat, and I think Konstantin was always hungry or angry when people said, "Oh yeah, it's a functional test tool." No, it's not. No. He was so pissed off the test word. For him, it's more a communication tool that, as a side effect, can be executed, which is practical. But that's it. And FangSpec could help you to write functional tests like you would do with inside a context class using Mink and everything. And it would help you to see the difference between the context class and the scenarios, which are two completely different things, and that the scenario itself, it's a communication part and should be totally agnostic of the web UI or the technical details or a lot of things that we do and that we write inside our features, and that it should be more separated. So maybe it could help. So to use FangSpec would help you to see the difference between both, and you would see a lot of similarities between your context class and your spec class. And in fact, there is so much similarities that you could use most of the extension of Behat inside FangSpec. So there is a thin difference that is worth being understood. And I'm not sure I understand yet, because I don't know. I should use Behat more or less. I don't know. I think it's really time consuming to write these features if you are the only reader. And it's really in rare case that there are actual clients that are willing to write scenarios and to to contractualize based on these scenarios. So that's not easy. But that's again a client problem or communication problem. But if you look at PHP spec, so every feature of PHP spec is written with feature first. And you can see that as we do with kind pirate bundle, we write actual PHP code inside the feature. And it's usual stuff. So is that worth it? I don't know. It's really hard to write correct feature files. Really hard. And if you compare this with some features, some fun specs that I wrote, so you can see. We start. You can see that it looks like PHP spec with it allows blah blah blah. You have the namespace of the class and you have the method it something. And if you look at the code, it's really like it really looks like fun spec, PHP spec with the it something. And then your actual code, the things that usually you retrieve inside inside a context class or something. But we are more used to Mink inside our context classes, so I will show you an example of usage with Mink. And I actually used FunSpec, an early version of FunSpec inside the client project. And I wrote it inside tests, functional. Client buys the product. So it's e-commerce stuff. So you have a simple method that verifies a very high level thing, and you use Mink as you would use Mink inside your context class usually, but you do everything in one step. The expectation and the context inside one spec. For example, I think the Mink API is really practical, and if you don't like it, you can still use page object extension or the page object library, which wraps Mink inside more object-oriented stuff. One object per page, and you abstract the elements on the page inside objects, which can be practical and reusable. But I really like it. You click on a link, you check a field, and you press a button, and you shouldn't make that appear inside a Behat scenario. Gherkin should not see the field name, and it should not say which button you click for a given feature. It should really describe the feature in an abstract way and use internally inside the steps the Mink API. That's what I think, and that's what we do here. So it's not that hard to make functional tests inside FunSpec. I think it's harder to use it inside Behat correctly than inside FunSpec. because with FunkSpec, you don't have to think about the given, the when, and the then. You don't have to be very careful on the naming and everything. So we should see at the usage if it really helps maintainability or not. But yeah, I don't know. But if someone is interested in looking at it, it would be great to have feedback on it. Yes, the page object extension. I think it's totally practical. I never used it, so I don't know. Did anyone use page object extension? I think it's a great tool. Okay. And do you like it? Yeah, I think so. What's the page object? It's a bit too much? It might be. Never used it, and I have to say my tests often fail because of CSS renaming, or ID or class name renaming and everything, or structure change, and this is shitty. It's really hard to maintain when you have evolving templates and everything. Yeah. Yeah, so indeed it might help when you have a template change and yeah, HTML output changes, because it's really tied to the DOM. But inside of, yeah, you still have to change your objects, but at least you know where it is, because you didn't put any DOM related stuff inside your context class, only inside the object that represents this page, so you know where to look at. Yeah, Andrew, it's good feedback. Might worth tests. And it's totally usable inside the FunkSpec, I think. Page object. I took a look lately, but yeah. So again, it's approximately the same thing as the Mink extension. So it's using Mink internally, and so there is the usual sheet. This is API specific, but this is the only thing. There is a initializer, the same that you have with a context initializer with a Mink, and what it does, it looks at, is the context class instance of page object aware. In case of, then it injects via setter the page object factory, and we can do the same with FunkSpec. We have to write another initializer, but it's approximately the same. And it's a bit sad that yeah, it's tied to Behat in that way. The only thing that is tied inside this initializer is the fact that it waits for a context. And I think we could generalize this thing. It could worth a try to pull request TestWork, just to see if we could generalize this concept of initialization. If I have time, I would do that. But page object extension, we just have to write a small glue between both, the same that we've wrote for FunkSpec here, the extension. make an initialize and make this. It's really that simple. It's crazy. The same. So yeah. Yeah, if you want to bootstrap something quickly, you don't need page object. Maybe you can do it later. Or on some pages, you don't have to use it everywhere. Or maybe you can do some interesting pattern and use typical OP. Imagine you have a grid that you use everywhere. You know, a grid object and a list, and you could use a generic grid page object to manipulate it everywhere without having to write every time the same code. Could I think it's more near of a correct OOP usage than use and very abstract extension or something. It's finally only objects. It's always objects. Yeah, but I think page object use inheritance internally. No, I see. But I think you can do most of the stuff. You can use native functionality of the language to generalize thing. Well, you use inheritance or composition. I think you can do whatever you want. And page object is just based on it has a little layer of convention. Yeah, you give him a name and he will find the corresponding class based on the conventions, but that's about it. Once he instantiates the class, you can do whatever you want with it, and you can use typical OP to do that, I think. Yeah, composition is usual, but what I meant is instead of having an abstract page object that you extend, you can have a generic page object that you inject inside other pages or other page objects, and that you use inside. So it avoids to vertically couple your classes, but still reuse useful method, but using the public API this time. So we should see a composition of the test library, we might say. Yes. So imagine you have one page, which is a user list page, and you have another page, which is a group list page, and both inside use a grid to list them and paginate and everything. And both the page objects of those two pages would have injected the grid page object or something. And this grid page object is able to manipulate a grid very easily. And you just have to call on this object inside the, for example, user page object, you call this grid object click row number 3, and it would do all the hard work. And you don't have to extend this grid page object. You can just inject it. That's what I meant. So instead of extends, it uses more. Any more question? I think we already 11:30, half noon. So it was a bit messy as always. We never know. I didn't prepare at all. Do I come in Kiev? I'm not sure. I don't think so. I think I wanted to go to Berlin, maybe SymphonyCon in Berlin, but it's all in German. And I even if I live in Germany, I'm a dick in German. But yeah, SF Camp UA would be awesome. It seems so interesting. I miss so much conferences. I would like to go to each of them. I don't know why I miss all of them. For example, WurstCon would have been awesome. Have you seen them? It was funny. WurstCon from Jeremy Mikola, as always. Awesome. And I think, moreover, I'm not sure I could leave my house with my daughter and friend in November. I have to look, and it's soon. It's in 10 days, or even less. It's in 4 days. Oh yeah, November. Sorry. Okay, so if you have any more questions, we can discuss that on the chat. I hope you liked it. I hope you enjoyed writing and looking at TestWork extension. So we saw how to stringify exceptions and how to use Mink inside another library easily with only 10 lines of code. It was very practical. So Constia made awesome work, I think. Really awesome. We didn't go inside Behat itself to look how he made stuff, how he used extension to write stuff. That's a bit sad. We should have looked at it, but it's typical stuff. He made great classes. Most of them are final, which means he thought about closing to modification but allowing extension. So it's really the open-close principle that he tried to follow, and it's really great because guess what? The number of pull requests on Behat is so slow. I think a lot of people use it. Maybe a lot of people still use 2.5, but I think there are a lot of people using 3.0 already, and very few pull requests. Why that? Because the code doesn't need to be modified to be corrected, I think, or a very few part of the code needs to be modified because everything is extendable, I think. And not extendable or everything is open because the API is correctly thought and open for extension, which means you can add stuff without modifying current stuff. And that's the most important part of writing a library. And I think it's good. So it's a bit complicated, though. It's interesting. I think he rewrote this 3.0 version at least 2 times based on the feedback and experience he learned from hexagonal architecture. And even though the class themselves are well abstracted and using interfaces and everything, in order to make something work, you have to look at a lot of parts in order to understand the whole graph. And the fact that if you forget to tag a service, it won't be used by another service, and it's really hard. So in this way, it's coupled together. It's what coupled. I mean, logically coupled, not hardly coupled. And you have to understand it first, but then it becomes very flexible. So it's not that coupled, but you have to understand it. And it took time for me to understand that, okay, so this CLI controller need to have at least one spec locator, which in itself uses a spec iterator, blah, blah, blah. It was a bit complicated to guess because there is no documentation inside internally. So of course it's hard. You don't know which tag to use. You have to guess. But it's a very young project yet, so it's maybe logical. So we could have had a look at that. It would be interesting. But I think we already saw how to make simple and useful extension. So thanks for watching. And if you have any question, don't hesitate. So I stop the diffusion now, and bye. Thanks, Andrew. You rock. You're very active. Thanks all.